And my triple cup, that's 2 times 2. Man, this shit dogging in the wartime, so
you know I'm ballin', usual like Kobe.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to my 5th episode of Dime Dropper. Before we get started, as always, make sure to follow us on social media on Twitter and Instagram at Dime Dropper Pod. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts and follow on Spotify, as well as subscribe to our YouTube channel, Dime Dropper Podcast. For today's episode, we're going to talk about the game last night, the Clipper-Laker game, but I'm also joined by a special guest, one of my best friends, New York native and Knicks fan, Lucas Lyon. We're going to get into all things Knicks, including their new hire at head coach and their history, among other things as well, including life on both coasts, since both of us have both lived on both coasts. So without further ado, Lucas, thanks for joining me, man.
Thank you, Darian. It's a pleasure. This has been a long time in the making, so it's good to see you. Good to see you working and hustling.
Oh yeah, man, I miss you, bro. It's been a minute since I've seen you.
Period.
Period.
Yeah.
So let's just start with the game last night. Obviously, everyone knows I haven't been too enthusiastic about the GSL, and it wasn't bad yesterday for the regular season. I don't mind for the regular season. It's the playoffs that's more of my issue with just the product itself. But it was a good game. Of course, the Clippers were shorthanded. We came up a little short. Had opportunities to win the game. But how much did you catch of the game last night?
I mean, I watched the end. It's nice to see that players are trying and players are really working hard right now. I think it's refreshing for them to be back on the court, and it looks like that. It was also nice to see, Anthony Davis. He looks like he's the best player on the Lakers. No disrespect to LeBron, but this is LeBron's team, but Anthony Davis is the man doing everything.
And I've been saying this all season long, and it's just dumb. Like, it's just dumbfounds me that when I heard the names of who the media is kind of putting up for the MVP,
yeah,
and I heard Giannis and LeBron, I was thinking to myself, I've watched every Laker game. I would honestly put AD in that conversation as well because of what he does on both ends. But once again, it kind of goes back to that last episode I did when I've gotten really good feedback on it, by the way, guys. So thanks, keep giving me feedback. But that, the media kind of puts these agendas up, and I don't think Anthony Davis has gotten nearly enough credit all season.
Definitely. I mean, in a previous pod, you talked about how Anthony Davis gets the most nonchalant 40. Just whenever he plays, he can step on the floor, 35, 40 points, 14 boards. It's just who he is as a player, and unfortunately, with players like that, when they play with LeBron, they're always overshadowed by his presence. And, I know Anthony Davis wants a ring. I know he's not chasing the superstardom. But, I mean, if Anthony Davis wants to be an MVP, if he wants to be looked at as a top 5 player in the league, top maybe even 3 player in the league right now, maybe he needs to part ways with LeBron somewhere down the road. It just depends on what his goals are. But
yeah, and I just think that it shouldn't have to be that way because he should be getting credit for what he's doing right now. He shouldn't need to have to leave to go seek approval. I don't think he honestly cares much. I think he knows what's going on, and if he wins the thing is with the playoffs is that all the fans are going to be watching all the games, so it's going to be pretty evident for everyone to see, unless you're just blinded by bias. If AD continues to play the best in the Lakers like we saw last night,
definitely
to see that he could be the Finals MVP if they win. But also, it's also the matchup with us is that LeBron, we have a lot of guys that we can throw on LeBron, like size-wise, that match up with him quickness-wise. Yeah. Whereas Anthony Davis, you could say this about every team in the league, but we really don't have anyone that can match up with him. And I think the Lakers did an amazing job last night. I've been saying this whole season. If when the Lakers play us, you need to force-feed AD. The whole thing has been, who's going to guard AD? Well, the Lakers have bailed us out as the defense by not force-feeding him sometimes. You got to go to him early and often, and that's what the Lakers did last night. And as a result, first quarter, they were up by 12. So that's what they need to keep doing. Keep force-feeding the mismatch, and that's the mismatch.
That's the thing. In the league nowadays, I don't know if there's really anyone that can guard AD one-on-one.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the Clippers, like you said, they match up well with LeBron. I mean, you can throw Kawhi on him, you can throw PG on him, and they'll do a good enough job containing him. But with Anthony Davis, he's dangerous from so many spots on the floor. He can pass, he can shoot, he can post up. He's good without the ball. You know, he's a very, very smart player. and he's very skillful, and that's really, really difficult to guard, especially for any team in the league, but especially for a team like the Clippers.
Yeah, and I think one encouraging sign, though, that we saw from the Clips last night was no fans PG, as I'm starting to call him right now, because without the fans and the pressure lifted, he looked like arguably our best player last night.
Yeah.
He was fantastic.
Something interesting, I forgot who said this, but someone said that it's easier to shoot in the bubble league because of the depth perception, because there's no fans or anything. So it's just easier to shoot. So I'm interested to see how going forward how that's going to impact players' ability to score, because just the level of playing without fans and how that influences their game will be really interesting to see, because a lot of these players haven't played without fans probably since AAU ball.
Yeah, and I think PG, that was such an encouraging sign to see him hit like that. I thought there was a lot of rust around a lot of guys on both sides. Definitely more so us. I think that the Lakers came in a little more prepared for this game. I mean, obviously we're missing big pieces, but Marcus was on a minute restriction.
Yeah.
Pat Bev was on minute restriction. I think Dion Waiters and Kyle Kuzma were really standouts last night for me, for the Lakers. Both ends of the floor. The last time we played the Lakers, he did the same thing. Kyle Kuzma on defense has really turned it up a notch against the Clippers, and props to him. And he was 4 of 7 from deep.
Yeah.
If he can play like that, the Lakers have a strong chance of taking this thing.
I mean, everyone knew from the beginning, from the beginning of the season, that the Lakers had a strong chance of going all the way. And then, fortunately, LeBron is a good leader, and LeBron is arguably the best player of our generation. And in certain situations, he does make players better, and in certain situations, he, not just on the floor, but off the floor. And I think that that's something he's brought to the Lakers, and I think that's something that shows in the younger players, is that, younger players don't know how to carry themselves, and they don't know how to operate off the court. They don't know how to operate in practice, and having a figure like LeBron there shows them how they can truly be the best player they can be, both on and off the floor.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to learn from people like that with so much experience, and I think at the end of the game, obviously, we got it close. The rest of the team outside of PG and Kawhi, by the way, I wrote an article on this game. Go visit Overtime Heroics to see it. The rest of the team outside of Kawhi and PG was 14 of 41 last night. So that's not going to get the job done. It obviously has to do with some rust. I mean, Shamet had some good looks. And once again, it was kind of back to my point in the podcast yesterday. Shamet, no pun intended, was put in a bubble or a box a little bit. He only got catch and shoot looks. So, to me, when you have 4 months off and you're strictly shooting catch and shoot, I don't care if unless you're like Reggie Miller or something, it's a very strong chance that you can, not hit. Yeah.
And that's the thing is, unfortunately, the first game had to be Lakers versus Clippers. Just to attract the fans and just to really get the attention that they really, really need right now. However, neither of these teams were really playing at their absolute best.
Yeah.
And when the Clippers are playing at their absolute best, I mean, you've seen it this season. They possibly are a better team than the Lakers, and they are really well coached. They're really well oiled, and I know come playoff time in this GSL, as you're calling it, come playoff time, the Clippers are going to be a huge factor, and they're going to be a huge nightmare for a lot of teams, especially the Lakers.
Yeah, I think that last couple minutes, props to LeBron. I got on him a lot. Here's also a thing people need to realize. He played good defense last night. Obviously, we all know he was using some hands, but at the end of the game, you're not going to call that as a ref, and I respect it because LeBron, the thing about me is I'm going to be impartial. Marcus Morris hand-checked LeBron on the shot that he missed, that he followed up his own miss with. So the refs were consistent. They didn't give the call to the Clippers. They shouldn't have. But people saying LeBron can lock up Kawhi after a couple possessions last night. I mean, sure, if you want to say that. I mean, when he wasn't using hands in the beginning of the game, he got blown by. But it's okay. I just don't like LeBron can do his thing. He plays good defense. I like to see the effort. That's the biggest thing. But people acting like he's freaking Scottie Pippen today, and that shit's annoying.
The thing about LeBron is LeBron can do whatever he wants. He can, if he wants to go out on the floor and for whatever the 35 to 45 minutes he's on the floor, play lock-up defense, he can. but he doesn't. That's not what LeBron wants to do. LeBron wants to, control the game, get everyone kind of involved. He's a little bit of a liability on defense. Like you said, Kawhi blows by him if he's not using hands.
I mean, I think Kawhi will blow by anyone, honestly, when they're not hand check. I mean, it's so hard to stay in front of guys last night, and that just goes to show. I mean, we're going to talk about it more as we go on, but last night, the game, like the refs, and it's not even the refs. These are just the NBA rules now, because the Clippers and the Lakers, when they play each other, they play really hard. Yeah. So when that happens, there's going to be a lot of context. It's going to be a physical game. And in today's rules, that physicality has been kind of phased out. And
definitely,
a lot of those are just fouls in today's NBA.
The interesting thing about the Lakers and the Clippers is I think there's two things going on. One, it's the battle for LA, and the Clippers are really trying to. I mean, if you drive around LA, you see that there's billboards that say like streetlights over.
Yeah,
spotlights,
I've noticed that too. A lot more Clipper advertising.
And Clippers advertising isn't in Hollywood. It isn't in Beverly Hills. Clippers advertising are in communities that aren't in the spotlight of LA. When you think of LA, you don't think of Inglewood. You don't think of the south side of LA. You don't think of East LA. And that's what the Clippers are trying to market towards. And so there's this battle for LA. And then the other thing is LeBron is trying to prove that he is a Laker, because as like Rami and Nick said on when you brought them on, LeBron hasn't really been fully accepted as a Laker, and LeBron's here trying to say I am a Laker, and he's trying to say that I am a Laker great, and LeBron's great. I love LeBron, but he's not a Laker great. When I think of LeBron, when I think of the great Lakers, LeBron doesn't even come in my top 10.
And that is because he hasn't played in the playoffs yet.
He hasn't played in the playoffs yet.
Now, if he wins a championship, though, that's going to propel him tenfold, even as a Laker to me.
I think so, but I still wouldn't put him over, I wouldn't put him over, obviously, Kobe, Shaq, Magic, Kareem, Worthy. I mean, even if you go so far back, you say like Elgin Baylor, these people...
But Elgin Baylor never won a ring for the Lakers. Would you put LeBron over him if he did? James Worthy's an interesting one because he was the third option on his teams, and people will argue. Well, the thing is, we don't even know if LeBron's going to be the number one player on this team if they win.
He's already not. That's the thing. LeBron's the face of the team.
But that's just I agree with you 100%, but that's just you and me's our opinion. Yeah. A lot of people think LeBron's still the best player on this team. What do you think of that?
I mean, I think it's okay to not be the best player on the team.
I agree.
LeBron is exiting his prime. Now is the time for LeBron to say, I am not the best player on the team, and I need to stop acting like I am. That was what led to Carmelo Anthony's downfall, and that's why he was out of the league for so long. Because Melo could not accept that he wasn't, that he was phasing into a role player. And I'm not saying LeBron's phasing into a role player, but LeBron's moving to where CP3 is now. Where CP3 is not necessarily a superstar. Chris Paul is now, a very, very valuable asset to a team, which we'll get to later. But a very valuable asset to a team, can provide a lot, and can provide a lot on the floor, and more importantly, off the floor.
But do you think, would you say LeBron? I would still say LeBron's a superstar, even though he's like Chris Paul's like a star still. He's not a superstar anymore.
No, but LeBron needs to accept that his role is changing, and that he needs to feed more towards making Anthony Davis, proving that Anthony Davis is arguably the best player in the league.
And to end on the Lakers and the Clippers, I could not agree more, because in my opinion, if LeBron actually, took it off, backed up a little bit, said, AD, I'm going to let you fly, I'm going to be your secondary guy, I honestly, and they win the championship, even if LeBron doesn't win Finals MVP, I honestly think that would increase his argument to, in that conversation I was talking about, the GOAT, whatever, so much, because I think one of the biggest things about the greats of all time, of course, people always look at Jordan and Bill Russell, who were just kind of always the best player on their teams. Yeah. But there's a lot of stars, if you look at the all-time, that weren't always the best player on the team. And I think sometimes one of the big parts about a star in basketball is recognizing when it's your time and when it's not. And I think the perfect example of someone who did that so well was Kareem. Because when Magic first got there, Kareem was the best player in the NBA. And as time went on, the Magic Man started becoming arguably the best player in the NBA, and he took that back seat, and the proof is in the pudding with 5 rings. And, and... I
mean, when Magic arrived, Kareem was arguably the best player to ever step on the floor.
Exactly.
Forget best player on the team. I mean, when you look at, basketball in the 1980s, particularly the Lakers, prior to then, there was nobody nobody that played like Kareem. And Kareem was a player like him was unheard of.
I've never, even today though, I'm watching his footage. I've never seen anything like this guy. Ever. I've never seen anything like this.
There's nothing he couldn't do. And so when Magic came, they were a phenomenally coached team. And that's something that's really important. And that's also an issue about LeBron that I have, is LeBron's not the most coachable player. And when you insert yourself as the head of the team above the coach, there's going to be an issue.
Yeah, I agree.
And you look at successful teams, you look at the Lakers with Kobe and Pau Gasol that won those 2 rings, Phil was the leader of the team.
Yeah, even with Kobe and Shaq. All of Kobe and Jordan's rings came with some structure with Phil.
Phil was the leader of the team. When you look at, even the Knicks in the 90s, Jeff Van Gundy was the leader of the team. Off the floor, he was the leader of the team, and it was his philosophies that got the Knicks to where they were.
And Riley before.
And Riley, exactly.
Yeah.
So you have to look at how players interact with their coaches and how they work with the system. If LeBron doesn't like a system,
everyone says LeBron is the system.
But that's not the way it works.
I know, I agree.
If LeBron wants to coach, go be a coach.
Yeah.
Retired coach. If you want to be a coach, do that. But he wants to do both, and he doesn't want to be told he's LeBron and he thinks he's the greatest player to ever play, and he's gonna act like that. And like you said in your pod last week, and like you've been posting on your Instagram, that's not what the greatest player of all time does.
Yeah. So now we're going to segue into the Knicks, and they just recently hired Tom Thibodeau. Of course, the Knicks haven't made the playoffs for 7 years, and the new millennium for them has been an atrocity. I mean, they've become I hate to say this, but they're becoming the new Clippers at this point. And obviously minus the fact they have history, but in the current standing of the team, they're talked about the same way the Clippers are. The Clippers will never be good. The Knicks will never be good.
I mean, you say the new Clippers, but the Clippers have, over the past 20 years, the Clippers have been a better team than the Knicks have.
Facts.
The Clippers were better when you guys had Elton Brand. They were better when you guys had CP3 and Blake Griffin. The Clippers have had more success than the Knicks have. We've won 1 playoff series in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
The thing I love about this Thibodeau hire, it was between Thibodeau and Kenny Atkinson, and then there was something that the Thibodeau contracts were falling through, and suddenly Jason Kidd was the front runner, allegedly. And I was shaking in my boots because I did not want Jason Kidd anywhere near the Knicks. Because when you have someone like Jason Kidd, who kind of markets himself as this Giannis whisperer, and Giannis is a free agent, then we're going to run into the same thing we had where, we're getting Kevin Durant, or it's going to be, we're getting Giannis. And there's no way Giannis will ever step foot near the Knicks. With Thibodeau, he has a history of winning. He has a history in New York because he was Jeff Van Gundy's assistant from 96 to 2003.
Damn, I didn't even know that.
He was an assistant in Boston, and it was his defensive schemes that helped win them a ring. He is an incredible player development coach. When Larry Johnson came to the Knicks in the late 90s, he had his back injury, and the Knicks were stacked at power forward. And Tom Thibodeau worked with him to make that transition from a 4 to a 3. And that team, that 98 team, or that 99 team went to the finals that year. And that was a big part because of Thibodeau. And Mike Malone was also an assistant coach on that team. Patrick Ewing, from when Thibodeau's name was mentioned, Patrick Ewing said, "This is the guy." Thibodeau's a phenomenal coach. He's proven that he can win. He has the 11th best career record in coaches with over 500 games played. He is a proven quality coach. And the other thing I like about him, and the thing that I really appreciate about how the Knicks are operating now versus any time in the last 20 years, is one, they're giving him full autonomy with his coaching staff. James Dolan has taken a step back. He hired Leon Rose because he knows Leon Rose is a no bullshit guy. Leon Rose will not put up with James Dolan acting like he did when Donnie Walsh was trying to get Melo, and James Dolan was like, actually, let's just throw all our team at Denver, and completely screwed us. Leon Rose will say, you know what? Fuck this, I'm walking.
So who's Leon Rose? The GM?
He's the president.
President? Basically. President of basketball operations?
President of basketball operations.
So he's making all the decisions, essentially.
He's making all the decisions. Then he hired William Wesley, and as the, I believe, vice president, and then he hired Scott Perry as a GM. And the thing about Leon Rose is that Leon Rose started CAA, and he was Tom Thibodeau's agent. He was Chris Paul's agent. William Wesley was often associated with LeBron. A funny story about him is that when LeBron was in high school, William Wesley became friends with LeBron's mom's boyfriend, so he could get close to LeBron.
Wow.
And so, having people like that in our front office for the first time in a long time, having people that are going to act with vigor and gumption when it comes to attracting players.
So this Leon Rose, he just got hired this offseason?
Yes.
So let's just go through the squad. What do you think of this? What do you think of the squad right now?
So, I mean, the future of the squad is R.J. Barrett and Mitchell Robinson.
So what do you think? What do you think of Mitchell Robinson, R.J., Alonzo Trier, and you got rid of him, didn't you? Okay. So,
I forgot what the guy's name was, but we picked him up from the Nets, but he's gonna be waived too.
So let's say R.J., Kevin Knox, Mitchell Robinson, and Frank Ntilikina. I want you to give me all your thoughts on them. Who should stay? Who should go? Should they all stay? Go for it. So I don't watch that many Knicks games. Like, I'm not gonna front.
Kevin Knox has a season left. He's going through growing pains. One of the things like I really have never respected David Fizdale as a coach, but the thing that really made me lose respect for him was when he said our biggest opponent is Fortnite, because players were staying up too late playing Fortnite and showing up to practice too tired, and that's just complete bullshit. Like get your team together. Make sure that these guys are being paid millions of dollars to play basketball, and you can't even tell them to fucking go to bed early. And he had no control over the team. Nobody had any control over these players. And Kevin Knox is a player that needs structure. He has so much potential, and I know he's very talented. But if he doesn't get his act together this season, he's gone. I know Thibodeau's gonna be like, you're done. Frank Ntilikina is going to flourish under Thibodeau. If you've seen his FIBA highlights and stuff, he's straight clamps. I mean, he locked up Kemba when France beat the U.S. Locked up Kemba. I mean, Kemba couldn't do anything on him. He was scoring on him. If you watch his how he plays defense on players like Kyrie and stuff, he is a phenomenal defensive point guard. But he hasn't had the coach to push him in that direction. Now, I think Thibodeau, if you look at Chicago, Thibodeau loves point guards. He loves point guards off the bench, and he knows how to use them. He knew how to make, he knew how to find the value in players like Nate Robinson and John Lucas III.
What's his name? C.J. Watson?
C.J. Watson, exactly. And so I think Frank Ntilikina is going to step into that role as the point guard, of the second unit. And then be inserted late in games, depending on who we get in the draft and what happens in the offseason, but be inserted late in games to be thrown on whoever it may be, whether it's Kyrie, Paul George, Kawhi. He can hang with these people, and he knows how to make the right defensive plays, and it's not just that he doesn't hand check, he knows how to make smart defensive plays, and he plays defense intelligently. What
about RJ? People have been a little critical. He hasn't really, taken off with flying colors this season to people.
RJ has the makings of a star. And RJ is one day, maybe not this season, but maybe next season, he's going to be the leader of this team. And the important thing is getting a coach and a coaching staff around him that's going to show him how to become a star, and getting other players that are going to come in and show him how to be a star. And one of the things that the Knicks that's rumored is the Knicks are going to go after Chris Paul. And this is a really smart thing because Chris Paul and Leon Rose have a relationship. So for the first time, the Knicks front office looks attractive to people. Also, Chris Paul's contract is just bad. OKC's, they're paying him $80 million over the next 2 years. They're going to want to get rid of that contract. I feel like especially if they do well in the bubble league, because now they look attractive, and so then they get rid of $40 million a year. They can sign other players. The Knicks, we have the money. We're not actively trying to make the playoffs. We're just trying to grow our team. So if you get a player like Chris Paul in there, who can show someone like RJ how to go from a rookie with the assets and with the skill to a leader of a team. I mean, he will be. I know RJ will be an all-star sometime in his career.
Wouldn't you have to trade for CP though? Because
it depends because Chris Paul's contract is bad. It's just a bad contract.
You think they'll buy him out?
That's what the Knicks want to do.
Yeah, but there's no way after this season OKC is gonna buy out Chris Paul.
It also depends on how the bubble league goes. Right now OKC looks fantastic. So, if they end further than they anticipated, I don't know if Chris Paul will leave, and I don't know if they'd want to get rid of him. But if they end kind of middle of the pack, and they say, okay, we have, $40 million that we can spend elsewhere. Other players are coming on free agency, and Chris Paul is going to be like 37, I think, at the end of his contract or something. So he's going to be old, and they're going to say, well, spending $80 million on a guy that's going to retire soon, and we might not win a championship with him, but we can get more for him.
Yeah.
It might make sense.
Maybe.
Like I said, the Knicks have the money, and we're not actively going for a championship right now. The other thing that they're looking at is, I know Zach LaVine is a potential target. People have been talking about Fred VanVleet, and these would be longer contracts, probably like 5-year contracts. And you surround players like that have more experience in the league and more experience kind of stepping into the role of, stepping out of a rookie role and more into a leader of a team, more into this is how Fred VanVleet would be great because, he won a title. And I think Zach LaVine's emerging into a really, really fantastic player. And I think RJ just needs a year or two. He's only like 20 years old.
I mean, you do sound pretty optimistic, which is good. So what do you think of the Knicks had a bunch of power forwards this year. Do you need that to be a little bit more restructuring of the team?
So most of those players were signed to 1-year contracts.
Bobby Portis, Taj Gibson, Marcus Morris is on the Clippers now.
Yeah.
Mo Harkless is like a stretch 4 in today's NBA.
So Bobby Portis is gone.
Okay.
We signed him
you
to a
fine with
1-year
that?
contract. Yeah.
Okay. Taj Gibson's old.
Taj Gibson's staying.
But you like him?
I love Taj Gibson.
Okay.
And
I fuck with Taj. You went to USC. I fuck with him.
I think the thing that's going to be great about Taj is that he's been a mentor figure to...
That's one of those guys you're talking about. Older.
Yeah.
He's been there in playoffs.
And he's someone that succeeded very, very well in Tom Thibodeau's system in Chicago.
And he played, I'm pretty sure he was on Minnesota,
Yes,
too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he was... Taj Gibson looked fantastic. I remember watching those playoff series, and, he was electric. He'd do something, and he knew how to operate in that system. And that's going to be really great for Mitchell Robinson, especially. And I know that Mitchell Robinson's already improved because of Taj Gibson's presence. So I really like him, and he's also not there to play. He's not like, oh, I need to play 30 minutes a game, oh, I need to do this. He's just there because he knows his presence is needed for practice, his presence is needed for off the court, his presence is needed to help guide younger players in a position when they are during games. And I know that he's going to really help Tom Thibodeau going forward these next few years.
What is Elfrid Payton still in the Knicks?
Yeah, but he's gone.
Okay, for sure.
Yeah.
So I like him. We'll have a little
And then there's Dennis Smith Jr.
Oh yeah. People are wondering about him. What's good with that?
What happened?
How many games? Like, do you watch a lot of Knicks games? Like, do you regularly watch these games?
Yeah, pretty consistently.
Okay, that's good.
Dennis Smith Jr. His stepmom died this year,
Sad.
so there was a bit of a decline, and he didn't live up to the potential that he showed when he was in Dallas, and I believe that he is a quality player. And I think that he has the makings of a point guard that Tom Thibodeau could really work with. He's explosive. He can't really shoot. He can't really do much. But if he can learn how to operate in this system, then he'll be good. But I think he'll probably be gone by the All-Star, by whenever the trade deadline is for next season. I think he's done.
So the big year next year for the Knicks in terms of bust territory. Kevin Knox. We have, what's his name? We were just talking about Dennis Smith Jr. RJ Barrett still deserves a couple more years.
RJ's not going to be a bust.
Okay.
Guaranteed RJ's not going to be a bust.
Kevin Knox, not Mitchell Robinson, Kevin Knox, and yeah, Frank Ntilikina people are starting to say, but I guess we'll give him one more year.
Well, Frank, okay, the thing about Frank is that David Fizdale didn't know how to coach. And he didn't know how to use Frank to his advantage. And he also wouldn't let the young guys play. He'd see them playing, and then whatever, they'd make mistakes, they do well, and he'd pull them out and restructure the lineup, and then I don't know what the fuck would happen, but we tank. There's if you ever watch Knicks games, if you've ever watched them, there's a rhythm where we do well 3 quarters, then like maybe the end of the 3rd quarter, beginning of the 4th quarter, something happens and we lose. That's just it. Like, especially in the beginning of the season, the teams look promising. You're like, all right, this team's gonna be good. Especially if there's any Knicks fans out there, you know what I mean. Like, you watch and you're kind of excited. Maybe we get like one big win, and you think, oh, this team is gonna be good. And then the Knicks they're just the Knicks, and they fuck it up, and we lose games. I don't think that's gonna happen under this. I don't think that's going to happen under this coaching staff. I don't think it's going to happen under this front office.
So let's segue into something different, a little bit non-basketball. So you're someone who I met in elementary school when you had just kind of moved from New York.
Yeah.
I went out and lived in Massachusetts for 3 years. We both lived on both coasts. So what was one of the big things you noticed when you first moved? Like, this is different, or was it all kind of the same?
I mean, the big thing I noticed, and like it's just not like nothing's like sports related or anything, was that like schools had yards. So when I was a kid, like my school just had like this kind of like big concrete or big brick like area for us to play in. And my first school I went to school in Hancock Park. There was like this big field and handball courts and all this shit, and there was none of that. Like New York, they just don't have the space for that. So a lot of buildings are like, all the schools are in like kind of big buildings and stuff, and obviously the weather.
Yeah.
You come out here and the weather's gorgeous, and you don't really have bad weather days. And then I guess the other thing about LA's a lot calmer than the East Coast. I mean, I don't know what it's like in Amherst, but
Well, Amherst is a college town, but like Boston is like, I want to say it's definitely not the hectic of New York whatsoever, but it's like, it's a small city, and there's a lot happening in that small city. LA's gigantic, Chicago, New York. I mean, New York City is boroughs, but like LA, Chicago, London, like those are big cities I've been to that are just fucking massive.
Oh yeah, and I think that like LA is an anomalous city. LA, you can kind of get everything, and especially just California. I mean, California is a place where you can go to the beach, the desert, and the mountains in the same day, and that's something that's kind of unheard of to anyone from the East Coast, especially in New York. In New York, you're like, going to the beach is a huge fucking deal. You gotta take a couple trains. Or you just if you live in the city, you take like the D train all the way down to Coney Island. But everything is so, everything's so congested in New York, and there isn't much diversity as to like the actual like landscape of the city as there is to LA.
And one thing I also noticed about the East Coast mentality compared to the West Coast, at least this is an LA thing. I don't know if it's all of California, but in East Coast, it's a little more, people have a little more, this is the way it has to be. When you leave college, you got to get a job. You're going to build your way up the system, build your way up the ladder, and this and that. And in LA, you have a lot of dreamers. You have a lot of, I can be whatever I want. I can run into Lil Baby on a restaurant and, get his number and shit. Maybe stuff will change for me. Like, you have those type of people that are like, and that's actually something I like to an extent, because I believe, I used to have this mentality that like, you got to be realistic, but like fuck realistic. Like, a lot of shit happens that you don't expect in life. You know what I mean? Like, and you just gotta.
I think that California, since it's kind of like, since like California first became a state, really has been this opportunistic state.
Yeah.
People came to California to find gold. Who knew if they were gonna fucking find gold? You know, but they fucking came all the way across from wherever they were. You know, they risked dying to come here to maybe find gold. And now people, you know, from all over the world think, oh, I want to be a fucking actor. Oh, I want to be a musician. I'm going to go rough it out in LA. And there's this sense of, like, oh, it's LA, anything can happen. And in East Coast cities and bigger metropolitan cities, people are a little more realistic in the fact that you see people grinding more. Definitely. And you see the hustle and bustle of life. And like I said, and everything about LA is like movie-esque. The weather is perfect. You know, you can, there's Hollywood, there's Beverly Hills, the beach, Santa Monica. Like, everything about LA is like, you know, really nice. And especially seeming to like people that aren't from LA. And I think when you come to LA, you know, there's a shock that, oh shit, LA's outrageously expensive too.
Yeah.
Oh shit, LA's not clean. You know, Hollywood's a fucking dirty mess, you know. And
traffic is terrible.
And I'm not saying LA's bad, but I think that people have higher expectations for what the city is. And, you know, I think I grew up, most of my life I spent out here. And I think that there is a wonderful thing about Los Angeles because you're right, your dreams can come true here. You know, you can meet someone at a coffee shop and, you know, get a job in a studio. You know, you can theoretically get connected in certain industries and you can get your foot in the door in LA, you know, easier than maybe anywhere else in the world. But I think LA kind of holds this like false reality. And New York, Boston, Chicago, you kind of associate these cities more with reality and what life is like. And I also think that's also because of the culture that comes out of those cities. The music that comes out of Chicago, the music that comes out of New York. You know, you look at like the famous ass people that come out of New York. You look at like Jay-Z, Biggie, Wu-Tang. These are all people that have had to struggle in their lives. And these are all people that have had to do anything they possibly can to survive. And, you know, in LA, it's Hollywood.
But what about playing devil's advocate? What about, I mean, it's not like there's not bad and tough neighborhoods in Los
definitely.
Angeles. Like, you know, you have NWA that were like famous for all that.
But LA isn't the nitty gritty. That's the thing. New York is the nitty gritty. Chicago is the nitty gritty. LA isn't.
Yeah. Definitely
and
not. That's not our
and NWA
image.
NWA countered that image. They said, "Fuck that. California isn't, you know,
all sunshine and roses."
Yeah, exactly. LA is fucking Compton. LA is South Central. LA is, you know, downtown LA. You know, you look at like even Northern California. You look at like San Francisco. San Francisco is so romanticized, but San Francisco's has a huge homeless problem. Oakland and Richmond, those are all cities that are riddled with violence. Richmond. If you shout out to anyone who knows Coach Carter, great movie. But you know, there's a different culture associated with the cities, and I think that, you know, I also think that when people move to New York, especially, people kind of expect to like not be living lavishly. I think people expect, because you know New York's expensive. You know, anyone who moves to New York, or you know, they're probably living in an apartment with neighbors, with like roommates and stuff, and you know that you're probably not going to be able to afford to live in Soho, or you're not going to be able to afford to live in Chelsea or downtown. But people come to LA and they think, oh, I can afford to live in Hollywood. You know, oh, I can afford to live in Santa Monica, and then you realize it's $3,000 a month for a studio, and then you're moving farther and farther south and farther east, and now you run into the issues of like gentrification and these issues that are really plaguing LA. And, you have a huge homeless issue here as well. And now these people are being kind of pushed out of the neighborhoods where they've lived their entire lives.
So to also talk about someone, I kind of want to have, just to pay tribute a little bit to every person from LA that I know is a fan or that, we talked about at length. You were somebody that when I first met you said that I don't love the Lakers, but I'm a big Kobe Bryant fan. I remember you saying that. So obviously this year's been really hard for everybody. Yeah. Just talk me through that, man.
So I got in a car accident. I went with my cousin to a junkyard so we could fix my car up, and so we could get like parts and stuff. And my phone was kind of blowing up. I think it was like the group chat we're in, and it was like Kobe's dead, and I was like, what the fuck? No, he's not. Like, there's no way. Like Kobe. In my head, I'm like, Kobe doesn't die.
Yeah, just one of those invincible guys.
And then there was like shit. People were saying that like all of his daughters were on the helicopter, and I'm like, no, Kobe doesn't die. And the first jersey I had was a Kobe number 8 jersey that my mom gave me, and Kobe was such an integral aspect of my life, not just basketball, but just like, New York loves good athletes. And New York loved Kobe Bryant. You watch, like, Kobe always showed out at the Garden. Before him and Spike did the Kobe doing work, I think he dropped like 45 or something.
Nah, he had a game 60. Where he dropped 60
he
or
dropped
something
60.
Like that.
Yeah, he dropped 60 because he was like, I'm not gonna fucking have a bad game and then go work with Spike Lee after. I'm gonna fuck shit up and then go talk shit with Spike. And but then you grow up with Kobe's coming to the Garden, and he's gonna show out. And just the way Jordan did. You knew Jordan's coming to the Garden, Jordan's gonna fucking put on a show. Jordan's gonna drop 40, he's gonna drop 50, he's gonna, something magical is gonna happen. And that was Kobe. And there's a level of greatness that can't be denied and needs to be accepted and respected everywhere they go, and Kobe's one of those players.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of things I just learned to talk about what you said, not even basketball related, is like, one, he didn't just say he worked hard. You saw it. You saw how hard he worked. And he didn't make excuses, and he just gave it his all when the pressure was at its highest. And for me, I respect that. I just respect athletes or people. I mean, athletes, this is a sports podcast, but like, that don't just talk, really walk the walk and play as hard as they say they're going to play. And Kobe was so consistent about that, and I really appreciated getting to watch him for so many years. And yeah, I just love asking people about what they think. So now we're going to go into something else. When 2K12 came out, you and I had this huge thing about we need to unlock all these classic teams because that's the first time they had the classic throwback teams in the game.
They had so in 2K11 they introduced like the Jordan team.
Yeah.
And then you could unlock all of Jordan's teams and then all of the team that played against him. So like when you played the 90-91 Lakers and you'd unlock the Lakers, but then they just have their starting 5 and then the bench would be fake players. And so 2K12 was the first time they fucking had, like, just other OG teams. They had, I think they had, like, the Bill Russell Celtics and the Jerry West Lakers and...
The Showtime Lakers, too?
They had the Showtime Lakers. They had the Knicks. They had the Knicks, the Magic, the Rockets, and you had to unlock these teams. So I remember we'd be here screaming, like, trying to unlock
at your
these
house,
teams
even.
at my house. And I remember one time I was about to unlock... I think I was about to unlock like the 80s Celtics, and my little brother came and turned off the PlayStation.
Oh God! Power off button.
He hit me with the power off button. He was like 3 years old maybe, and he was just like, "I want to play my game," and I was so mad. But you can't blame him. He was only 3, but I remember that, and that fueled the love for basketball I already had. Because I got to play with these teams that I'd heard about, that I'd heard my dad and my grandparents talk about. And I got to kind of visualize what it would be like if, I was watching the Rockets play the Knicks. Or if I was watching the watching Shaq and Patrick Ewing go at it, and because of that game, I began to fall in love with the old school big man. And it's just, I mean, that it's weird to say a game changed your life, but that game changed my life in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think 2K12 was one, actually, with another guy we're going to have on the show and part of production, Sammy D, that we just probably out of all the basketball games I played, I think 2K12 was the one that resonates with me the most. Yeah. And it's for that very reason. And I think what was cool is that, we'd always heard about the big stars of the old generation. Yeah. But that game let us, as young kids, like, you, especially when you were unlocking them, you put me on as so many different players, like Dick Barnett or Sweet Lou Hudson or Derek Harper or Vernon Maxwell. Like these guys, the nearly star. Well, Lou Hudson was a star, but like the near star role players that were on these relevant teams for so long that no one just talks about anymore.
Yeah, and even if you look at, because like you said, you've been watching like as much old basketball as you can, and you look at players like, you look at teams like the '70s Knicks teams.
Yeah, perfect segue. We're gonna get to that next.
And you think of Walt Frazier, but then you don't think of Dave the Busher. You don't think of Dick Barnett. You don't think of even Phil Jackson, honestly. You don't think of, players that
forget about the best one of them all, Willis Reed.
Exactly. Like you don't think of these players, and you think of two of them maybe, and you know they're great, and you know they should be respected, but you don't know why they should be respected. And unfortunately, Walt Frazier has stayed around basketball and stayed around the Knicks. His entire career.
He's Mr. Knicks.
I mean, him and Mike Breen. I mean, I can argue this all day. They're the best commentating duo ever.
And if people don't know, Mike Breen is not just the ESPN lead commentator of the NBA. No. He's been working for the Knicks as their play-by-play guy on MSG for years. Except when he does ESPN games, they have Marv Alberts. Is it his son?
Yeah.
That takes over for him. But yeah, I mean that's part of the reason why I don't watch Knicks games right now, and even though I've always been a big Knicks sympathizer, as I said in my first episode. But man, when the season comes back, I may just watch him just for Mike Breen and Walt Frazier. Like in the beginning, before they hopefully, I don't want to see before they start sucking, because I don't know if they will. But
no, they will. Look, right now the Knicks' philosophy right now is just take it a day at a time. And there's no we're making the playoffs next year. There's no we're making the playoffs in 3 years. There's none of that shit. It's just we're taking it day at a time. We're rebuilding. Tom Thibodeau, he had his press conference yesterday, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was yesterday morning. He had his press conference, and he said, I got to speak to all the players. I got to figure out how we can practice, whether it's like virtual training or whatever, and we're not promising anything. We're just focusing on every day as it goes.
And I want to go back to, so we're talking about the Knicks right now, and it's all this, doubt and all this, questionable stuff. But I'm looking, obviously, I posted on Twitter and on Instagram that I'm doing, it kind of sucks because that's what part of the reason why I didn't want the GSL to start is that it's taken a lot of my time. I was really enjoying over quarantine getting to learn more about the old game, and I've found out so many things that make me so angry about, one, the media and how they talk about certain things, and two, how misguided and how stupid, sorry to be mean, some of the young our generation is about basketball. When you talk about all time, LeBron, Kobe is the GOAT, you need to understand who you are comparing these people to. You need to understand what they did, and not just looking at their Wikipedia and fucking Basketball Reference stat lines. I'm telling you, seeing greatness is totally different from hearing about greatness. Yeah. And I'm watching these, so I started with the 60s, because, when you guys say, one of the main stereotypes, let's start it out. One of the main misconceptions I always hear is Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain had those crazy stats because they played against a bunch of white dudes. Now, those clips that you're seeing of white dudes running around, that's the 50s.
Yeah.
When Bill Russell was one of the first black superstars, in the beginning when he played a couple years in the 50s, sure. But the whole 60s is not too crazy in terms of the play, looking at a screen of a game is not too different from the current NBA. I can name so many stars off the top of my head just now that I know that if anyone tries to tell me they were weak, you also have to realize, people say of course there's so many people trying out to make the NBA these days. there were only 8, 9, 10 teams. So there's only like 150 spots in pro basketball as it is back then. So it's harder to make the NBA. It's very limited.
Definitely. My grandpa grew up in Pennsylvania, where like around where Wilt Chamberlain played high school ball, and he said that people would flock from wherever they could to come see this guy play because they knew he was fucking incredible. And so you have this guy playing this giant playing against just a bunch of guys in Pennsylvania, and then he goes into the league, and obviously in like the 50s and early 60s,
there wasn't too many guys that could match up.
There weren't too many guys that can match up.
But even today, how many people are matching up with a 7'2" guy with a 50-inch vert that could bench press 500 pounds and wasn't even allowed to overpower people like Shaq? Like, I don't know if I've shown you this clip, but there's a reason why he does that little dip shot and creates this guy, because you couldn't back people down with like force, like go body to body with them. So I thought that's all Wilt did. I literally thought all he did was back people down, overpower them, and dunk. That's all I thought he did, but that's not what he did.
The interesting thing is you watch, like when you take Shaq for example, Shaq had power and finesse. Wilt and Bill Russell and Kareem, they operated solely on finesse. They couldn't overpower people. And if you put Wilt Chamberlain in today's game, top 5 player in the league, guaranteed, maybe the best player in the league. I don't think there's anyone that could stop someone that powerful, someone that's skillful, someone that intelligent on the court. There's nobody that could stop him.
Yeah,
he was a genius on the block. He knew how to operate, and he knew how to score. He knew how to pass. He knew how to rebound. The fact is nobody rebounds like him and Bill Russell do. No one's grabbing 25 boards in a game. I mean, didn't like Dwight Howard do it like 10 years ago or something?
He averaged like 13 and 14, and he averaged like 13, 14.
Yeah, but like
the pace was the reason why the numbers are like that, guys. Just to inform you guys, is because of the pace. We have a very high paced game right now, but it's not as fast as the 60s. The 60s used to come out and just chuck. Like, I don't want to say chuck like they were just throwing up stupid shots, but like they used to come up and shoot very quickly.
They were gunning. I mean, the game was
it was fast. It was really, really fast, and that's why the stats look like that. But yeah, I think, and it goes to a lot of things, is that people think that the game has gotten, another big misconception, the game has gotten so much better. The game is at its height. And its popularity, 100%. But the game itself is a subjective opinion. The game has completely changed. Doesn't mean it's for the better.
Yeah.
People can shoot better, like long distance for sure, and better handles, because that is what we are teaching. We are moving further away from the basket. That is the way the game is going. But these players also lack a lot of skills that I'm seeing from those guys.
Oh, definitely.
Lot. And I'm looking at these Knicks teams of the 70s, the early 70s. Dude, they were amazing on both ends of the court. And people think like, because another thing, people not dribbling with their left hand, people not hitting crossovers like that. Once again, it's because of the rules. You had to have your hand over the ball at all times. You couldn't do that shit that Iverson's doing, or that, like, so many, literally, like the way we dribble today now, all that they're carrying back then.
It's interesting because like if you look at like Instagram trainers and stuff like that, like Devin in the Lab is a good example, and they're teaching people like misconceptions about dribbling. And one of them I heard was that you're supposed to dribble with your fingertips. And it's like, no, you're supposed to dribble with your palms. And
no, it always has been fingertips though, isn't it?
Not anymore. Now coaches.
But even when back then, you wouldn't be dribbling with your palm.
Not like with like this.
Yeah.
But like, you're supposed to have the ball
hand over the ball.
Hand over the ball.
Yeah. None of this side stuff. None of this wide crosses.
You're supposed to be dribbling with like the tips of your fingers. You know. And now it's more relying on your whole hand.
Whole hand, exactly. That's a better way to put it.
And that wasn't a thing. That wasn't even allowed. I don't think that was considered palming. No.
Yeah, exactly.
So now the way the game is being taught is so different than was being taught even 20 years ago. And we were talking the other day about how, imagine if Kenny Smith was shooting threes
at a higher clip.
Clip. Imagine if anyone really was shooting threes at a higher clip. The game would be completely different. And it's a really new thing that, like, now the mid-range is obsolete. But when we were growing up watching basketball, mid-range was still a thing. I mean, Kobe, Melo, Rip Hamilton, Chris Paul's great in the mid-range. Everyone, they'd hit a jab, drive by, maybe take a screen, and pop a 15-footer. And now that was such an integral part of the game for so long. Probably from, I would say, from 1980 until 2012, 2013. the mid-range game was such an important part of basketball. And now it's just completely off. Now, mid-range shot is considered a bad shot.
I hate that because, in my opinion, the bad shots are the ones that people used to take like right in front of the three or like 18-footers. Like that might as well just be a three. But a mid-range 12 to 18-footer is a shot that those older players mastered so well, and it's a shot that you can even hit contested, and that's why it's effective. That's what people don't understand. Contested three, I don't give a shit if it's Kobe. That is not a high percentage shot, no matter how you look at it.
You know, what was interesting is that when Damian Lillard gamed the series against the Thunder, and Paul George was like, "Oh, that's a bad shot. That's a bad shot." There are very, very, very few people in the world where that is not a bad shot for, and Damian Lillard is one of them.
Yeah, and Damian Lillard's also one of the, in terms of range, one of the best shooters we've ever seen.
There are probably, I don't know, 3 people in the world where that shot is not a bad shot. It's Damian Lillard, Steph Curry, and maybe Trae Young.
Yeah.
You know.
Fairly accurate.
And
KD,
now,
I don't know about the sidestep, but just pulling from there, KD even.
But you have kids watching the game, and they think that that's a good fucking shot. They think pulling up from 35, 40 feet out is a good shot. You know, you had LaMelo in high school pointing at the half-court line and pulling up, and it's like, you know, you think that that's a quality shot, and it's not. And it's not a shot that's a shot that in any other league, in any other era, that's a shot that gets you fucking benched.
Yeah, facts.
Immediately.
100%. And I hate when people try to use this, oh, if you put Steph Curry in this time, this and that, like, first of all, he wouldn't play the same way. Secondly, he would have to dribble exactly like all the players back then, like Walt. First of all, Walt Frazier has a handle. Like, people don't understand. Ball handling used to be about keeping the ball. Don't let anyone take the rock from you. And I'm seeing Walt Frazier come up the court, hitting behind the backs. That shit is on a string.
Well, see, now more and more as the game kind of evolves, it's more about, you know, dipping into the bag.
It's the fancy. That's me and my friend Will we're gonna have on the podcast at some point. We always talk about this. Is that fancy has been perceived to be better?
Yeah.
And like we're encouraging the James Harden, the tween cross, at the top of the key.
Yeah.
When it's like you're exerting more energy. Like there's a reason why basketball drills they do that 2 dribble, 3 dribble.
Yeah.
It's because it's effective. And back in the day when there wasn't all this spacing, that's another thing I noticed about the old game guys is. Points are just so much harder to come by back then because it's congested.
Yeah.
There's no spacing. There's traditional power forwards. And you know what's funny is that you talk about when we were kids, bro, this has only just happened like the last 5 years.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I was watching the 2013 finals a couple weeks ago or like a couple months ago, and they weren't shooting that many threes. Like it wasn't crazy.
No.
It was only after the Warriors and once again, that's how basketball happens is you follow the models of teams that came before you.
Yeah.
You know, like we following the models. Now you look, and this is when I say it's really not that hard to adapt. Look at Brook Lopez. I use him as a perfect example. Brook Lopez was a great post-up player, a solid first time, you know, mid-range, one of the best centers in basketball. And now, as he's gone older, he's lost a step. He's reinvented himself as a guy that's pulling from fucking 30.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not trying to discredit Brook Lopez because that's good. I mean, that clearly shows he's worked on his game.
Yeah.
But it's not that difficult to expand your range like that. Like, if you think Karl Malone and Kevin Garnett, who were cash from 18, if they weren't asked to start shooting threes, they wouldn't start pulling? Like...
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that in the press conference, Thibodeau was asked about that because his offense, you know, if you look at like the Bulls' offenses, they don't have, you know, fives at the 3-point line. You know, his offense is kind of modeled after like Tex Winters. You know, so you don't have centers shooting threes, you don't have power forwards shooting threes, and he was asked like how that's gonna work. How his offense is going to work within the new league. And he said, you know, we'll have to make some adaptations, but my offense works, and I'm not going to change it. And there's this misconception that you need to shoot threes to win. And there's this, you know, you look at, I think, some of the best teams of all time are Greg Popovich's championship teams. And those teams aren't shooting threes at a high clip. You don't have Manu Ginobili's not pulling up from 3 all the time. Tony Parker rarely ever shot threes.
And he was cash.
Like, he was cash. Oh,
he got so much better at shooting as his career went on.
know,
His mid-range, I mean, you could not go under the screen anymore with that guy.
I mean, the interesting thing is that, like, you know, you look at Tony Parker could hit threes. Tony Parker could score whenever, wherever, however he wanted. Same with Manu Ginobili. You know, but then you had players like Danny Green, who you have on the floor because he can hit threes. And that works within the system. And he's won championships with that system. And he doesn't change his system. He doesn't do anything. He knows what works, and he sticks to it. And there's something that a lot of coaches are kind of doing now, especially younger and younger. They're saying, all right, let's play further and further from the basket. We're going to play 5 around the perimeter, 4 around the perimeter, 1 in the key. And that kind of ruins the game in a way, for me at least.
When you say for me at least, that's exactly what I mean. It goes back to preference.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. These players, the players gotten way better at basketball in the last 5 years than we started growing up as kids.
Yeah.
No, you think so?
Well, like high school players, or
I'm talking about the players in the league. I don't think they've gotten better. I think it's the same. There's a lot of stars in the NBA today, but are you telling me there wasn't a lot of stars in the NBA 8 years ago? There was.
No, definitely. I think that players are becoming more versatile, but I think that versatility is also players becoming more versatile creates more holes in their game.
Well, because, what kind of versatility?
These players are able to do more. Players are able to shoot more. They're able to kind of have more finesse with the ball. But if you look at older teams, pretty much prior to the Warriors, pretty much any older team, players knew their role on a team.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Any championship team, you didn't have fucking Bill Wennington. He's not there to get buckets.
Yeah.
He's not there to show off and flex some handles or shoot some threes. He's there because they need a body there to defend, to rebound, and to maybe score. And
that's why I think the evolution of role players has changed a lot. Now, here's the thing, is that because of the Michael Jordans, the LeBrons, the big stars, no one wants to be a role player. Nobody wants to be George Hill. Nobody wants to be Steve Kerr, all these guys. They want to be the star. And that's why I think everyone's game is predicated on, trying to get their own now. Yeah. And, the old role of role players was rebound, toughness, defense. Let's look at Dennis Rodman for an example. He would get a lot of rebounds today, but he would if you can't really do much offensively, you're considered a liability in today's game. Does that make Dennis Rodman worse than players in the NBA? Absolutely not. It's just what is needed for the time.
But if you look at the championship Lakers teams, the 2010 Lakers, you had Lamar Odom, Shannon Brown, for instance. You have these players that come in, they get you. Shannon Brown gets you 12 points off the bench, and he serves a purpose to do a little bit of scoring and to be exciting. Shannon Brown would come in, he'd hit some three, he'd bang out on a fast break, get the crowd jumping, get the players hyped, and then you throw everyone back in. You throw Kobe back in, and now you have the momentum in your favor. And Shannon Brown's not there. Shannon Brown's not all right, I'm going to show off my bag, I'm going to come out here, I'm going to cross some fools up. He was I'm going to come out here and do what I'm supposed to do. And players more and more, and if you watch high school basketball, players more and more coming out and showing off that they're good. And that's not the purpose. That's not what wins rings. And you look at players like Jimmy Butler, for instance. Jimmy Butler's not going to win a championship the way he plays. Jimmy Butler knows he's a good player. He's a fantastic player. But he wants to show you that he's a good player. He plays like he...
I will say he does play winning basketball, though.
He plays winning basketball, but he doesn't play championship basketball.
Well, do you think... I think the problem with him is he's not the best player on a championship team, but he thinks he is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of players have that mentality where they want to be the best player on a championship team.
Yeah, I think a lot of people... one of the big flaws in players today, I've noticed compared to the old, is a lot of them have a really false perception of who they are.
Definitely.
I understand you have big goals for yourself, but the players back in the day, they just got it. I don't understand how to even describe it. They just got it. They're smarter. They're really good at finishing around the basket. Post game is people want to talk about more skilled. As far as big men, they have no. I don't think shooting jumpers when you're 7 feet just is that cool. The whole point of having big men that could shoot was because they're so big and good around the rim. Then you extend it so that they're unguardable, a la Dirk Nowitzki.
Yeah.
You want not just shooting when you have no post game. Doesn't make any sense. That's just spreading the floor.
I think the last genuine big man we had in the league was probably Andrew Bynum.
Yeah, he was fantastic, and he was amazing.
Before Andrew Bynum declined and started fucking bowling, I guess. Mm-hmm.
2012, he was unreal.
He was unstoppable
for our generation, as far as bigs. I'm not gonna.
If you remember Like, because everyone's like, oh, Dwight Howard's the best center in the league. Dwight Howard's fucking dog shit. Dwight Howard couldn't dribble, he couldn't post up, he couldn't do. The second he turned his back to the basket, he was gonna fuck up.
And that's why he kind of like, as his athleticism has gone down, he hasn't been able to, like, carry over that game.
And Brook Lopez, which you brought up, Brook Lopez was another example of that, where he could, he turned his back to the basket, he could take you. He faced you up, he could take you. He could pop that 15, 14 footer.
Yeah, he had a nice little blend.
And then, now he started to slowly extend his game. And then as he got older and he started being able to, like, maybe take these young guys a little less, now he can expand his game a little farther out. But then you also throw him the ball in the post, and he knows what to do. And a lot of players now, they get the ball in the post, but they don't know what to do.
Not at all. I saw Zubats get the ball out, and he's honestly, which is crazy, better than a lot in the league. He hits a jump hook here and there, but I saw him yesterday at a switch, and it was just, like, embarrassing.
My favorite role player, probably of our generation, is Tyson Chandler. Tyson Chandler always.
He's not much of a scorer though, Tyson Chandler.
No, he's not. But he's in my eyes, he's the perfect role player.
Facts, and he was even like a borderline all-star.
Yes, but he knew his role, like on the Knicks, for instance.
Yeah.
One of the things I always loved about him was he knew that he had to get his hand on the ball.
Tip it out. Oh my god! And at times he would just tip the ball to half court.
He'd fucking just slap the shit, and it's like grab the rebound and get the stat or whatever, Like, but he didn't care about that. He didn't care about having good stats. He didn't care about doing any of that shit. He knew that his job was to keep possessions live and to play defense, and he did that incredibly. And successful teams, you look at successful teams and you have players like that. Even the Heat teams, where you had players like Mike Miller, Norris Cole, Mario Chalmers, they knew their roles were to spread the fuck out and wait for LeBron to give you the ball and play defense.
Yep.
And that worked, and those teams won championships.
Yeah, I just think when you look at the evolution of the game, the basketball started a lot more fundamental, started a lot more team oriented, and as we had these individual talents, it's become more ISO, and now it's evolved into we just have pick and rolls into ISOs now. It's all pick and roll. It's not. You rarely see people like mano small forward versus small forward, center versus center, point guard versus point guard, taking each other off the dribble. Like it's after you get my screen, how do they react and read and react to the pick and roll? Because the NBA, the rules have made it so that defense is nearly like impossible to play against some of these guys facing up without hand checking. Like the pick and roll, once you get that jumper and you got a little handle that could like get by people, at that point you've become unguardable in today's league.
There were minimal people like that. I mean, you had in the '90s, you had like Nick the Quick, you had Rafer Alston, you had Stephon Marbury, Allen Iverson, that could dip into a bag and kind of bring street ball to the NBA.
And those are the big guys that changed it too, like Iverson and One, like these type of guys.
And I don't know if you should watch the Stephon Marbury documentary, A Kid from Coney Island. It's fantastic. And you realize that he brought a different take to the game, similar to how like we said how Iverson did. And now that's how everyone's playing. And I think about if you put Stephon Marbury in today's game,
he would like it a lot more.
Oh, he'd be probably a top 3 guard in the league, I think. He could shoot.
I mean, there's a lot of good guards in today's NBA, but I feel what you're saying.
But I think that because I think the game's tailored now more towards his game.
I mean, the game is just tailored to guards now. Yeah. Back in the day, 1, you have hand checking. 2, the dribbling rules hadn't loosened up till around mid-'80s, and then later in the mid-'90s when you could really do wide crossovers. Iverson goes. When people used to say like, is that a carry? What Iverson's doing? I understand now. It's not a carry in today's rules, but back then it was. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a big thing. When I'm seeing now the late '60s, you got a lot more players that are good with the rock behind the back and doing things, crossing over more. So, the misconceptions that you guys get about the past, you guys got to really do your research and look at it because you're getting fed a line of bullshit from the media and from a lot of people. The game has changed aesthetically more so than athletically and all these different things that people say.
You also got to understand that the NBA is a huge commercial business, and the NBA is being marketed more as entertainment now.
Exactly, and people wanted to see. So like look at people want to say, another example people like to use for the NBA has gotten better is they're scoring 120 points now here and that. You understand, in like 15 years ago, I was watching the 04 finals actually, and a couple weeks ago, and the basketball was unbelievable, but it was just great defense. They were allowed to be more physical. Like you saw last night's game, it was just fouls every 5 seconds. Like it's so unbearable sometimes. I feel like an old man now watching these games. But yeah, you're not allowed to do the same type of things. And that's not, those players in the 04 finals are not any worse. No. It's just like, for example, you don't have a guys that can stretch, like you don't have centers that are spacing the floor. But how many centers are doing Ben Wallace things today? As good as he is.
The thing is if you look at, if you put the Warriors against that, if you put the Warriors in 04 against that Pistons team.
With those rules or
with those rules.
Oh yeah, that's not pretty.
They get fucked. I mean you have players like Rip Hamilton, Chauncey Billups, Tayshaun Prince. They would bully you. And Rasheed Wallace, Ben Wallace, you were getting fucking bullied. And that's not a thing that happens anymore. You don't have, you have more people kind of complaining about calls.
As ever before. I've noticed that at big time going to Washington. They never bitch. They never bitch about it.
That was one of the things that I always hated about Chris Paul. Yeah. Was Chris Paul someone would touch him, he'd be like, what the fuck? Like, I got touched. Like, no, suck it up. Like, get the fuck up and play. If you, in any era prior to, like, I think, the hand-checking rule was...
04, right after the 04 final you're talking about.
When you look at how Dwayne Wade fucking took off after that. And he, if he didn't hurt his knee, I mean, Dwayne Wade would have been, he is...
I still consider him one of the greatest.
Yeah, he is. But, Dwayne Wade would have been unfucking believable. Because he was so quick, he was so versatile, and he knew his role.
And once again, that's another great product of the environment type of thing. There's a reason why Dwayne Wade was so good and didn't shoot threes like that. There's a reason. That's not the way it was back then. It doesn't make him any worse. If anything, it makes him more. I think he has much more diversity than a lot of stars. For example, like James Harden, like he's great and all, but like I feel like it's become so predictable. Like just it's either the 3 step back at the top or he drives to a little floater, like goes to the rim. Like D Wade had in between. He had post game. He was great on the drive. He had so many different aspects to his game. So now to end it out, we've talked a lot about the old Knicks and some great teams. Give me your all-time Knicks starting 5.
My all-time Knicks starting 5. All right. That's tough. All right, so at the one, it's obviously Walt Frazier.
Yep, I'd agree with that. This one's a little harder.
2, probably Earl the Pearl.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I can't honestly. That's another thing I found out because like right now I'm on like 70. I don't know how much I'm gonna keep continuing as of the GSL starting, but I'm gonna try. He was on the championship team, that's runner-up for the championship, 1971 Baltimore Bullets against Kareem and the Bucks. And then he went to the Knicks, who were already amazing. Like, I was like, what the hell? Like, this shit's crazy, but continue.
Earl of Pearl. This is a bit of a stretch because he's more of a 4, but I'm taking Bernard King.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I'll take that.
I'll
take that.
Yeah, I gotta have...
In today's NBA, he'd be a 3.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, maybe not. He'd probably be a 4.
He'd be a stretch 4.
Yeah.
But I'm putting Bernard King at the 3.
Okay, I'll take that.
I can't leave him out.
Yeah.
And then at the 4 and 5 is obviously Patton Willis.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
I also think that something that's a little slept on is I think Patrick Ewing is slept on.
Yeah.
In today's game.
Those Knicks team, so many years they were so close. They're one of those best teams to never win a championship that don't get talked about enough.
Just like the Phoenix Suns.
I'll take the Knicks over the Suns all day. Oh, are you talking about the '90s Suns? You talking about the? Oh, I was talking about I think talking about 7 seconds or less. I was like, the team just to me was never gonna. And they were the start of the spacing when they had Boris Dio at the 5 and constantly spacing the floor for Nash. And this is a perfect example of how hand checking, taking out, changed the game for guards. Yeah. You know what the first year that Steve Nash won MVP was? The first year after hand checking. So. And I'm going to end it with this. Since I'm going to ask this to certain people that I know and respect their opinion on history of basketball. Who are your top 5 players of all time?
Top 5 of all time.
You don't have to do an order, but if you want, you can.
Jordan, Magic, Kareem, Bird, and Russell.
No LeBron, no Kobe.
I'm sticking with that 5. I love Kobe. I think Kobe's a phenomenal player. I think he was probably the most iconic player of our generation. That's my 5. I think Bill Russell was too iconic.
To me, you don't even have to defend yourself with that one for me, because I've been watching a lot of like his stuff, and I don't think there's anyone that understands team dynamics like he did ever. He's unbelievable. So I respect that pick. The one I would say all of the four guys you named I have in my top 5. The one that I would say is not controversial, but I'm interested is put Larry over them.
I love me some Larry though. But
Larry Bird is, I think, by our generation, probably the most overlooked player.
Not even overlooked, disrespected because of lack of knowledge, and it's sick. It's sickening how bad it is.
Bird was a fucking bucket. There was nothing. He was lockups. He was a bucket. He could score. He could rebound. He could do everything. And the issue I have with people that leave out Larry in that conversation is Larry and Magic are like right there.
They are.
You can't say that Magic is better than Larry because Larry could pass just as well as Magic.
I mean, you can say he's better, but you can't say it's like they're on different tiers.
Yeah, but Larry could pass just as well as Magic.
No, he can pass well. Nobody in the history of basketball can pass like him.
That's fair. But I think Larry could see the floor.
You can make the argument. See, here's the thing. People want to automatically say it's LeBron, but I haven't seen enough Larry footage. And assists are not always the indicator of who's a good passer or not. A la Stephen Curry and Chauncey Billups. 2 very smart players, 2 great passers that don't have a lot of assists because that is not what their team needs. I would say, to go off your point, you could make an argument. I need to watch, but people say that Larry Bird is the best passer that's not a point guard to ever play. LeBron is in the same conversation.
I think that the thing about Larry Bird, like you said, is that being a good passer isn't about getting assists. Being a good passer is about knowing where to put the ball in order to score.
Absolutely.
And Larry Bird was a phenomenal passer. And I think Magic is the best passer to ever step on the floor. And I think Larry's probably second or third.
And that sounds pretty good. Before we end, do you want to let people know where they can find you? Or
I mean, I'm on like Instagram and stuff. I guess my name's Lucas Alex Lyon, Lyon with a Y. Yeah.
So great episode, Lucas. I'm really glad you joined us. We talked about a lot of good things. Let me know what you guys think of this episode and what you guys want to see next. Peace.
Thank you for having me.